it's I actually no, like I know you're joking, and but and I think that I don't take a film by credit, because it's a collaborative medium, and the film would be so much I have like a specific vision and all this stuff, and I've been into this since I was 9 years old, and blah blah blah. But without the people beside me, and and many others, like you can't be pushed to be your best self. Like you have something in your imagination, and it's a little foggy, and your collaborators help solidify it and make it real. When the score record, is like one of the times when I'm always just like struck by how collaborative filmmaking is, because you see, like the second violinist, who's absolutely incredible, and they might like the movie, they might not care at all, but they've gone through years of training, and they are an incredible technician, artist, and without them and their experience and their background, you wouldn't have the score, which adds to this whole thing. It's that's one of the coolest things about making films.
I was joking because you did mention the collaborator when you were by yourself. So just it didn't take.
Yeah. But it was nice to have a little speech for no reason. Yeah.
It looked like it really came from the heart. So I think everybody really believed it.
Yeah, it's the beer.
No, you mentioned that it took some time to work on that film, but it was all for the best because you've been able to collaborate with all of you for the longest time, and being able to bring this vision of Nosferatu together because of the work you were able to do together, and that was very fortunate that it took so much time. I was wondering, maybe so we can have everyone in the conversation, when you start talking about this version of Nosferatu that's true to what you have in mind, who do you start the conversation with in terms of the visual aspects, the research that you're going to do to bring a certain era, a certain country into film? Like, did you start with, are you going to film what sort of camera you're going to use, like how it's going to look, or do you think about like the costume first, or what design you're going to go, like what's the process between you?
I mean, I don't know, like, Linda, do you want to talk about the lookbook stuff?
Sure. One of the really fabulous things that Robert first makes and offers to Craig and myself and Sharon and all of the people who are, props, whomever, are lookbooks that have really wonderful images that he's been collecting. And I think that you use them in the writing, so a lot of it is embedded actually in the story that we're reading, in the script that we're reading. So that's kind of the baseline. And then in terms of costuming, I would then find more research, find more specific research, because they have to end up being garments that people can wear. So it is, that's the research part.
And there's all these visual images in the lookbooks, and then I also make long laundry lists of films that people are supposed to watch, but Jaren's list, Craig's list, Linda's list, Lily Rose Depp's list, Nicholas Holt's list, Bill's list, they're all different,
Do we know each other's list?
No. But I mean, they can share if they want, but yeah.
Permission.
Yeah.
Is it a different list than what you gave us to show? Which is
that's my list.
Is it close to anyone else?
The number one cinematic influence, like after Nosferatu on this film, for me anyway, is The Innocents. but I don't know that that is necessarily something that like the two of you.
Yeah, I watched it.
I mean, I'm sure you watched it, but I don't know that you were like thinking about the innocence a lot. Maybe
Did you see the
Jaren,
references?
you were a little more, you know.
Maybe. Yeah, I get it, but I just like, I do. And, you know, gosh, you put a lot of work into that list, and, you know, but we're doing prep when, you know, and by the time we start prep, I've seen like 8 of them, you know, not 20, but then it's like, but then you distill it, and then I get to understand, like, we're looking at this movie because of this, because like, so, you know, you send me movies sometimes, and it's like, I'm just, okay, here's a list, I'm just watching the whole movie, and I'm just like, what am I, you know?
Well, one of the things on the list was Zhawowski's The Devil, and Jaren's like, what the fuck is this supposed to do? You know?
What do I do with this? Like,
and
it's kind of, like, yeah, it's kind of hobbling handheld stuff, and you know, like subject-wise, fine, but like, this isn't the lighting. What are you gonna do? This isn't. But then you have to explain. I need you in the room to be like, yeah, obviously we're not gonna do this handheld version. We're not gonna shoot on a 24 millimeter lens. We're gonna just look at it for the blocking and imagine it shot on a crane. You know.
yeah.
And it's like, okay, great. So it's much more productive with you.
You had little notes with the list
Yeah.
when you ask for it.
Yeah.
And then can you exchange and give him a list, or tell him like, this is what I have in mind?
I don't think,
Not really.
I don't think I think that way. It's just like I take in and then I digest, and then it brews, and then there's something, you know, that comes out, and I like to be a little naive, you know. So, and then Rob can be super researched, and then I get to, you know, sort of digest and then come up with something ridiculous, and you know, it's either good or it's shit, and you know, we work at it from there.
And Greg, what about you? At what point do you start coming with your own ideas and your own process?
Well, I mean, from the very beginning, I mean, right away. As soon as I get a script, often that look.
And your list?
I'm sorry?
And your list?
And my list. And my list. First, it's usually the script and the lookbook. And then I start gathering my own bits of research and sharing them and just talking. I mean, honestly, it's a great collaboration between everybody here. And so, yeah, you just start going through it all. It's really right away. And the great thing about Rob, at least for me, is he's very generous in that he shares what he's thinking about doing really early in the process. So on this film, I think we all got this original script in 2015, 16, something like that. So, I mean, that's a good long time to think about it. And it's great.
You'll get a lookbook sometimes before a script, you know, which I've come to prefer, even coming, you know, when I'm reading scripts by other directors. Like, I look at the lookbook first so I know how to interpret, you know, what I'm reading.
And then everyone has their own list of questions, because it all, you know, brings up questions in each of our areas. And so it's, you know, what's the backstory for this? And, you know, what about that? And how do these two things go together? And how are we going to do this? And what's that moment like? You know, what's Jaren thinking for this? What are you and Jaren thinking for this? What are you and Craig and Jaren thinking for this? You know, so it's builds and builds and builds like that.
And how fast can you adapt to changes? Because it's such a long process on that film specifically. You know you're going to change a lot of things, including like maybe casting, or like the way you're going to do the research for like costumes, or the way what material you're going to use.
I think there's not a lot of change per se, but it's how are we dialing in what we're all discussing to be the right thing for what the film needs. I think, you know, Craig maybe experiences the most amount of quote change because Craig's working on sets that he's designed and is building, and then Jaren comes in there with his viewfinder and is like, maybe we need to move the door a little bit over here, or, you know, but the sets aren't finished. You know, so I think maybe somebody, maybe it was David Cronenberg, maybe it was every director who ever lived, talked about like movies being sort of like foggy, and like the more and more you get closer to production, the more the fog clears and you get to see what you're actually after. and I think that's part of the process.
And and like, if I can just say, the two of you don't improvise that much. I mean, you do a lot of prep. We do a lot of this conversation and things that are changing during prep, so that when we get to there's always something that gets thrown at you, perhaps here and there, and I don't think any of us really have.
Yeah, I wouldn't look at it as change so much as growth. Like it is. One thing that I find absolutely astonishing working with Robert on The Witch, I did a huge chart with all of the characters down one side and all the scenes across the bottom. With The Northman, I did that. The Lighthouse, I did that, but it was a small version. And very little changed, in terms of adding scenes or flipping things. And that is so rare, like I don't know that I would do that with any other director, actually, because, you would be redoing it all the time. So that is such a fabulous thing, because it means that you can really start to plan, and you're not going to be upended, or you're not going to be completely, you have to throw half of what you've done away. And so I look at it more as growth than change.
Yeah, you can go deeper instead of like trying to starting over 3 or 4 times, And sometimes you get asked some, interviews talking about, well, something might come up last minute, or the happy accidents. What do you do about happy accidents? It's like, yeah, but during prep, not when you're just there with 65 people standing around. Like, you have a nice long prep, and then you're there to allow inspiration to happen. You're not just trying to react, go for the low-lying fruit that you can get done in 5 minutes.
I think that a lot of my favorite directors don't do this kind of planning, and I think that a lot of times it can be lifeless to do this kind of planning, and maybe my films are, I don't know, but it's certainly not my intention. But I think Willem Dafoe, who I love to work with, is when we were working on The Lighthouse, he was saying there's this perception that in order to be great and to be truthful, it needs to be spontaneous. But in all my years in the Worcester group, I've learned the discipline of planning something, rehearsing it, and carrying it out. And if you have rehearsed it and you've planned it enough, and you know what this is, as long as you are in the moment and it's truthful, it can be as intense and as something that is made up at the moment.
Does that apply for all of you in terms of the preparation? But
Sorry, I missed the first part of that.
Is it what Rob said applies for all of you in your work, in terms of preparation to maybe not improvise, but
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we do a lot of work during prep to plan. I mean, I'm the art department, and so when I get thrown a curveball, it's that the walls need to be ripped out and we didn't know it, and then they have to be back in the morning. And yes, I handle those curveballs, I think, as well as anybody.
Very, very eloquently, yeah.
But, hopefully you're not going to walk on the set and say, oh, actually, I want this to be completely different, because I'll be screwed. Exactly. So it is all about prep. And yet, I think that, if there ever was a challenge that happened at the moment, I feel very comfortable that all of us would handle it with ease.
But again, there is change. There's a long, just a long period of openness. It's just that slowly, like you said, comes through the fog, and it forms. And by the time we're shooting, we know what we're doing, and that's just so comforting,
There couldn't be a lot of spontaneity in terms of the costume, because they're such intricate garments with so many layers that have to fit the actors, and they have to be able to know what it is that they're going to be wearing, and props and jewelry and things they're going to have to be handling. It might be, I mean, going back to Willem, I have watched Willem on 4 films, and he can do one scene 8 different ways, and any of them would be valid. And so he has that spontaneity available to him, and he's conferring with you. And, you know, so it is planned, and it's planned, and it's planned, but the spontaneity still happens. But I think that that may be more in the performance area than, you know, any of the things that we have to prep.
Yeah, because I mean the staging and the camera movement is so precise that you know, and it's all crane and dolly and no steady cam and certainly nothing handheld, so there's not a lot of room for error.
They just have a very clear playground, I guess, yeah, as far as like just give it the life, but here.
Are you a very directive director? Do you have like very specific things you're sharing with them?
Yeah.
Okay. Is it reciprocated? That it's the all the way around?
Yeah, these guys, we're all maniacs, yeah. But it's great, you know. I mean, Linda and I fought for like 3 weeks about how the size of Orlok's furry hat, you know.
Who won?
It was a compromise.
Mid-size?
Yeah.
That's why I'm limping, because we do leg wrestling.
With him or with the actor? Because if it's with Bill, I think it's harder.
I think that this cast was really remarkable because they really, everybody wanted to be there. They were so like hungry and ferocious to be a part of this movie that like everyone was really lovely to work with. And like, you know, Bill, obviously, like, that's an intimidating hat, but he's like, you know, also a dead, rotting Transylvanian nobleman with a mustache and a forelock and all this other stuff. So like the hat's the least of it, but they were all willing to like trust and you know, take the leap of faith, you know.
There's one, I mean, there's many scenes that are very memorable and remarkable, but I particularly like love the part when Nicholas goes to Transylvania and he meets like all the gypsies, and there's a very weird atmosphere that's a little different from the rest of the film. It's nearly like a film within a film. Is the only is the only cast at this moment from the entire film, and it's a bunch of different people who come in, won't stay, but have very strong presence, like right away. And I wanted to know a little bit more about the creation of that piece.
The Transylvanian village sequence was potentially the hardest sequence in some ways. It was like incredibly difficult to cast. We had Roma, like non-actors primarily from the Czech Republic and Slovakia and from Romania. You know, yeah, they were mainly non-actors. There is the young guy who does the great dance and the woman who does the shimmy. They're Slovakian and they are like do kind of like hip hop inspired and traditional Roma dance inspired stuff. One of the production assistants knew about them, and so we reached out to them. But yeah, and then I mean, Craig can talk about building the Transylvanian village, and Linda can talk about how difficult it was to research the costumes for this scene. But it was tremendously difficult, and we also worked with like a Romanian ethnomusicologist who has a band called Trei Parale to do the music for the scene.
Well, as for the set's concerned, actually one of the tremendously fun things I did was when we were in Romania. We all went, or at least Rob and I, and you were there, Jaron was there. We went to a couple of the open air museums that they have where they've collected some of the buildings around Romania and they picked them up and moved them there. So you could see actual buildings from the period and the crazy carving and all of that. And it was great to see because I had images of it, I had photographs of it. But it was nice to be in there and to show Jaron, yes, they have really tiny windows.
It's a night scene, so I just light some candles.
But and actually, Florin Lazarescu, who is our Romanian folklore consultant and also wrote the Romanian dialogue, said, who grew up in Transylvania, said when he was at the set, he was like, I had a memory that I haven't had since childhood from like being in this set, which was, I think, big thumbs up.
I didn't know that.
Oh, really? You didn't?
No.
Oh.
No, it was a really fun set to do. It was we built that in a field.